The Tale of Shafia. Neither here nor there, but not so long ago, there lived a Bedouin storyteller named Shafia, who was known for her near perfect memory and evocative performances. Beautiful, bright eyed, and wise beyond her years, she was said to have the perfect anecdote for any situation. Her reputation was so widespread that even those in the cities knew of her talent. This was how word of her came to reach the Sultan's wazir, who traveled for 7 days and 7 nights to meet with her. When he came to her tribe's land, he prostrated himself before the sheik and pleaded for an audience. Shafia met with the wazir in her guest tent and bade him to tell her his woes. He shared with her the disturbing tale. His once benevolent sultan was afflicted with a grief so profound it clouded his judgment. He had lost his first wife to childbirth and his second to betrayal, and ever since, killing her in punishment, he suspected every woman plotted to shame him. Every week since the second wife's murder, he calls for a new woman to be brought to him, the wazir said, and at the end of every week he accuses her of some slight and kills her. He pressed his forehead to the ground and spoke humbly. They say you have mended broken hearts and charmed beasts with your stories, wise storyteller. So I beseech you, tell me how to calm his majesty's unnatural rage. Shafia considered. Then she said, there is a truth to every story, and I have not yet discerned this one. I will meet with your sultan and speak with him myself. The wazir frantically shook his head. The only way to meet with the sultan now is to consent to be his wife. You will not survive the week. Shafia simply smiled at him. Loyal wazir, one cannot know the outcome of a journey if one is not brave enough to take it. And so saying, she went to prepare for her departure. Her family despaired at her decision. They tried to convince her to stay, claiming she had little to gain and much to lose. But Shafia was resolute, so there was nothing to do but honor her courage and pray for her safety as she strode out with the wazir. 7 days and 7 nights passed before they came to Madine's gates, and then the wazir guided her into the city and to the palace where the sultan sat upon his throne. I have brought a legend before you, your majesty, said the wazir, a storyteller named Shafia, who has a request of you. Shafia bowed. I would ask the honor of being your wife, your majesty. The sultan's surprise was second to his suspicion, but he nonetheless agreed to the storyteller's request. He rarely welcomed Shafia into his palace, and had sad-eyed servants dress her in the richest robes and purest golds. They attended to her every need until the end of the week, at which point the sultan called her to his chambers. No woman had survived this encounter with him, but Shafia was unafraid as she entered his room. I have a question for you, he said when she arrived. Will you answer it truthfully? You have my word, your majesty. Then tell me, why did you offer yourself to me? Shafia thought for a few moments, and then she said, have you heard the story of the haughty merchant who woke up to become king for 3 days? Much like he believed himself to be hallucinating, I too thought I was dreaming when the wazir sought me out. How could I not be compelled to follow him to your palace and seek out the truth when given the opportunity? The sultan hissed in anger. You told me you would answer my question, but instead you speak in riddles. Continue like this and you will pay for your deceit with your life. It was just as the wazir had said. The sultan had found some bizarre fault with her and intended to kill her for it. But Shafia did not wilt against the unexpected threat. My apologies, your majesty. As a storyteller, I draw most of my truths from allegory. She looked out the window to the sinking sun. If you find it permissible, I would tell you the full tale before you take my life. The sultan hesitated, but in the end bade Shafia to continue. So it was that the storyteller told him the tale of the proud merchant and the shrewd king. In the story, a king overheard a merchant ridiculing his decrees and decided to play a trick on him. He commanded his servants to bring the merchant to his palace in the dead of night and to address him as king when he woke. At first the merchant believed he was living a dream, but he soon realized how difficult it was to rule. Eventually, the true king revealed himself to the merchant and thought he had originally meant to punish him for his gall. He instead decided to reward him for his mettle by making him his adviser. The merchant did not understand the king's true burden until he was given the opportunity to walk in his shoes, Shafia explained. That is why I came when called, so that I might know the full story. But I must confess, I am nowhere near as wise as the merchant, who advised the king on various issues. There was, for instance, the matter of the conniving jinn who infiltrated the king's army. Shafia was clever, weaving one story into the next until the sun rose, at which point she paused. The sultan demanded she continue, for he wanted to know how the king would handle the jinn. But Shafia feigned fatigue and humbly asked if he would delay his judgment by one night so that she would refresh herself before concluding the tale. The great ruler thought himself, "What is one more night?" and he agreed to her request. He had soldiers watch her the whole day until she returned that night. Again she wove one story into another. In the next adventure, the king agreed to pardon the jinn for his scheming if it traveled with the merchant to find a relic, a wish-granting ring said to belong to a jinn king. And how did they unearth this ring from beneath the sand sea? The sultan asked. Shafia gazed wistfully out the window. Might I have one more night to finish the story, your majesty? And so it went. Every night the storyteller answered one question, provoked another, and asked for more time. Days passed into weeks, and weeks into months, until the stories became conversations. The sultan asked Shafia for advice about policies and jinn, and she shared her wisdom in the form of fables. Soon, everyone in the desert kingdom knew she had avoided death. It was only then, upon hearing the rumors, that the sultan realized he had fallen into the storyteller's trap. Worse, he realized he had fallen in love with her. Fearing he had doomed himself to another betrayal, he told himself he would gauge Shafia's loyalty by allowing her to speak on his behalf during his audiences. But Shafia was as humble as she was wise. When bickering merchants, sobbing mothers, and aggrieved soldiers came asking for advice, she would say, "I am but a storyteller who draws my truths from allegory, whereas the sultan speaks from experience. I would never be too presumptuous as to offer counsel in his distinguished presence." The deflection was as effective as it was flattering, for the sultan still deferred to Shafia's judgment when it came time to offer his verdict. A year passed, and everyone rejoiced at the miracle of Shafia's stories. Everyone except for the sultan, who still harbored the lingering suspicion he had been played for a fool. He devised one final plan to save his heart. One night, as Shafia was about to drift off to sleep in his arms, he stole a knife off his bedside table and held it to her throat. "I have a question for you," he said. "Will you answer it truthfully?" Shafia looked at him without flinching. "You have my word." "Then tell me, do you have a final wish before you face death?" And Shafia responded with tears in her eyes. "Do you remember the story about the merchant who woke to become king for 3 days? Once I likened my situation to his, but I knew we were not the same. You see, I knew this was a dream all along, and that some day it would have to end." She set her hands atop his trembling ones and said, "Though I could never understand your burden, I beg you to remember my advice. I came to you because I wanted what is best for this kingdom, and I believe you do too. May you prosper, your majesty." The sultan flung his dagger away with a cry. "I asked you for a wish, but instead you wish me fortune, you foolish creature." He pressed his forehead to hers and said, "But I am the most foolish for shielding myself with violence for so long. Forgive me, my love." The two of them lay in each other's arms, mourning everything that had been lost. But on the morrow of the next day there was hope. The sultan was a changed man, one who swore to redeem himself at the side of a storyteller who had saved his kingdom. For a time the two of them ruled with compassion, but death, that great divider of love, comes for everyone. In the end, even our beloved storyteller met an untimely end. But we must take heart. Though only the gods know how long we may live, we humans are the ones who decide when legacies die. Though Shafia is gone, her memory lives on through the lives she touched. That, gentle friends, is the power a story has.